Good afternoon, y'all. It's Joe Turner again. I'm using this video to talk about how you might come up with ideas for writing about your essays, and then actually some tips for executing those essays. Things like how to write paragraphs, how to have good guiding topic sentences. So if you leave this class with the ability to read an unfamiliar text, to come up with an argument about it, and to write a well-organized paper with strong paragraphs, I'll consider the course a success, and I hope that you would too. So this video, we're going to talk about those things. So you'll need two files open. If you go to Course Content Schedule under Blackboard, and then go to Essay 1 Resources, the two things I'm asking you to open are the sample essay, which we also used in the previous video, and the writing tips for English essays document. So you should have two documents open. I'm going to come first to the writing arguments about literature, the writing tips handout. This is a strategy I've used over the years, and I've had good success with it as far as how to locate an argument to write about. Now, the draft of your first essay is due July 22nd. That is next Wednesday. It is the same day that you will be expected to write a primary post about the virgin suicides. So you can, of course, you write your first essay on the virgin suicides and use that discussion post to do the same thing, right? So you can make the discussion post and the essay about the same topic. That's fine. If you want to save yourself time and effort that way, don't worry about it. Don't. That's not a problem at all. So for your first essay, you may write about either the Joyce Carol Oates short story, the Ursula Le Guin short story, any of the four poems for this week, the Yeats, the Adrienne Rich, the Sylvia Plath, or the Robinson poems, or Jeffrey Eugenides, the Virgin Suicides. So any of those texts are open for you to write about. The essay is what's called a keyword essay, so it should revolve around a central topic or keyword from the essay, and we'll talk a little bit about how to find those today. So most good theses or thesis statement, your argument, will begin with a question, right? You should never have a preformed argument about an essay or about a text, really about anything in your life. You should let the argument be dictated by the data available. You want to be what's called deductive, not inductive, right? An inductive thinker starts with the conclusion and then only looks for things that support that conclusion, whereas we want to be open-minded, critical thinkers who think deductively, right? We want to look at the evidence as neutrally as possible, look at the archive, whatever that archive might be. For our class, it's a series of literary texts. If you're a scientist, it will be the data you accumulate through your labs. If you're a social scientist, it will be the data you accumulate through empirical research. Whatever your data set is, you want to look at it and then think of what is the best argument that I can come to from this. Now, each of those disciplines will vary in how they do things, but for us, for English class, we're looking for problems and patterns within a text. Remember, I said that the job of a literary critic is to locate patterns that meaningfully explain some aspect of the text, particularly if that aspect is not obvious. So when we read Cormac McCarthy, when we read No Country for Old Men, or if you've seen the film, you'll notice that in many of his texts, and in No Country for Old Men in particular, he seems to want to mess with the reader, to frustrate their expectations, right? Just when you think a certain character is on the up and up, that character will all of a sudden be headed down. When you think there'll be a reunion of some sort, there's not, right? It's a very frustrating reading experience in some ways, but he does that for very particular reasons, right? So you might come up with a question, why does Cormac McCarthy want to frustrate the readers, right? Or if you read Edgar Allan Poe's The Fall of the House of Usher, which is a text I sometimes teach in English 300, you might say, I notice there are many instances of doubling, right? There's sets of twins. What happens to one twin happens to other twins. There's pairs throughout the text. So it doesn't have to be anything necessarily very well developed as your question. You just need to start with a question, right? Something that you don't have a clear answer to, that you can think deductively about and arrive at a potential answer. And here's a question I don't have a good answer to. When I'm reading the Virgin Suicides, I've noticed at least 3 references, and I'm not going to list all of them because maybe you want to write about this. Maybe you found other ones, and if so, run with this, take the idea. But three instances in which machines are described as lifelike beings, right? For example, on page 30, the sprinkler system timed, and I'm an English professor but can't type, to go on at 8:15 p.m., spurted into life. And on page 35, a digging machine stood frozen. On page 49, he kicked the machine into life. So if you're doing a keyword essay, you might make one of your keywords life or machine, something like that, and look at all the various definitions of those terms and see if there's any that might work here. So when we describe non-human things in human terms, that's called personification. It's not uncommon. It happens throughout all types of literatures from the Bible forward, right? But it seems to me as a pattern because Eugenides' work, The Virgin Suicides, is about the death of a bunch of young people. And he's writing about life. He's writing about death. So what is it that he keeps drawing our attention to the machine world and the ways that machines are lifelike, right? Is he saying something? Is he making some sort of comment about the Lisbon girls in particular? Is he making a comment about the narrators, the surveilling boys that keep watching them? Are they like machines? Are the Lisbons like machines? There's a lot of arguments you could come up with and then look for these textual patterns, right? This is just one pattern among many, many patterns that you might find, but it's one thing I noticed on my read this time. Another thing I noticed during my read, I don't have the language up here on the screen for you, but I'll read it out loud quickly, is one of the most moving, beautiful parts of this text occurs in my edition on page 40, where the narrators are reading Lux's diary, which is weird and inappropriate, of course, but they are talking about, on the top of 40, this is a quote, "We could never understand why the girls cared so much about being mature or why they felt compelled to compliment each other, but sometimes, after one of us had read a long portion of the diary out loud, we had to fight back the urge to hug one another or to tell each other how pretty we were, or felt the imprisonment of being a girl, the way it made your mind active and dreamy, and how you ended up knowing which colors went together. We knew that the girls were our twins, that we all existed in space like animals with identical skins, and that they knew everything about us, though we couldn't fathom them at all. We knew fondly that the girls were really women in disguise, that they understood love and even death, and that our job was merely to create the noise that seemed to fascinate them." So that's one of what I think is the moments of the novel that really gets at one of the central problems, right? Which is how society watches women differently than it does men. And then as a response, how does that shape the behavior of this subjugated population, right? But then if we go to page 55, they're talking about the fish flies that have died and accumulated. Happens in some places. This novel takes place in Michigan. And it says on the middle of 55 that insects started up in their hiding places all around, vibrating the minute we turned our backs. Everyone called them crickets, but we never found any in the sprayed bushes or aerated lawns and had no idea what they looked like. They were merely sound. So I'm reminded here in that verbal parallel where it says they were merely sound on page 55. And then if we go back to that passage I read you from page 40, it says that our job was merely to create the noise that seemed to fascinate them. So the word merely is repeated there, and rather than sound, we get noise. But I think that's an intentional repetition that you could potentially play with, right? So these are the types of things you're looking at. You're looking at repeated language, you're looking at repeated images, your repeated themes, anything that pops up multiple times that you can take as, why does this happen, right? That could be your starting point for thinking. So once you've got your problem or pattern, then you need to turn it into an argument. And often how you do this is almost like a mathematical equation. You start your sentence with your pattern. Here's a pattern, right? Jeffrey Eugenides gives us multiple instances of machines being described as humans in order to, and then finish that sentence. Why does he do that? Why do you think that happens, right? So we'll start off and look at an argument I made about Cormac McCarthy, right? Cormac McCarthy frustrates his readers' expectations. This is not a good thesis because it does not have an in order to question. It doesn't answer anything. It's just a statement. So here's basically what I think 4 qualities of a good thesis statement. That they are not obvious. That if I were to read your text, right, let's say you were writing about the virgin suicides and I read it, it shouldn't be obvious, right? So if you were to say the virgin suicides is about depressed girls, well, yes, that's true. Obviously, that's true. So that's not quite a good argument. They are almost entirely declarative. That is, they make some sort of claim. They're not interrogative. They don't ask a question. They make a claim as an argument, right? And this means that if I so desire, I should be able to disagree with you. My being able to disagree with your argument is a sign of its strength, not its weakness, because there are many, many different interpretations of texts, just like there's many interpretations of everything in life. And this goes to the next point. The theses are arguable. I should be able to disagree with you. And they are narrow and specific rather than broad, right? You'll notice that my example up above are very specific textual instances within in this book about machines coming to life or about the noise that captures our attention. These are 2 very specific patterns, right? So you'll see that my argument about Cormac McCarthy isn't good because it's obvious, therefore it fails criterion number 1. It's not terribly arguable, fails number 3, and it's not specific. Where in the text am I talking about? Which dynamics am I talking about? So if I change this, Cormac McCarthy frustrates his readers' expectations in order to, then you're on the way to finding a thesis, right? So this is the big thing I want you to get out of this particular video, is how to go about finding your pattern. And once you've got your pattern, then you can think of a keyword related to that pattern, a word that comes up over and over again. The next thing I want you to think about is organization, right? You should be doing some sort of pre-writing. I did traditional outlines in high school. I don't do them anymore because they don't work for me. They may work for you, and if they do, that's great. Use them. Clustering is where you take various ideas you have about the text, you write them out on the page, and then you see which might be related to others. I like to do this by drawing out relationships. I'm a visual thinker, right? So if I had machines written on there, I had life written on there, I might be able to draw all kinds of connections between them by seeing it physically on the page. Maybe you think that way too. Idea association, well, which idea leads to other ones? And in free writing, just start writing. Don't correct anything. Just give yourself 5 minutes, write, and see what comes up on it, right? You should be doing some sort of pre-writing, and part of that pre-writing should be tracking quotations in your text. Take notes, underline, whatever you have to do so you can go back and find the language that you need to quote and work with. Second thing is forget the 5-paragraph essay. It doesn't belong in college-level writing. Instead, you want to write whatever form is necessary to make the argument that you're making. You should have very strong paragraphs with very strong topic sentences. I love topic sentences more than almost anything in the world. If I could, I would get a tattoo on my chest that says, I love topic sentences. They matter that much to me. The first sentence of any paragraph is your topic sentence, and it needs to do at least 3 things. It needs to connect to the thesis, forecast the contents of the paragraph, and then transition from the previous sentence. I'm going to use this paragraph, the second paragraph in our sample essay, the topic sentence from it, to talk about a good one. The narrator's dissatisfaction with how deeply immersed he has become in consumeristic values prompts his quest for an identity. That's beautiful. That's almost answers an in order to question. The narrator is dissatisfied with how deeply immersed he is in consumer society. And what happens then? He goes on a quest for an identity after that. This answers a question. It's deductive. It's wonderful, right? And then you'll see throughout the paragraph, he goes about answering how explaining the relationship between emptiness of consumer culture and his quest for an identity, and even draws some nice quotes from the text to support that, right? So, one way you might keep track of your paragraphs is to write the thesis on the top of a sheet of paper or on the top of your Word file in the header. Then each time you write a paragraph, you have that thesis statement there, and you can ask yourself, how does this particular paragraph connect with the larger argument I'm trying to make? I will follow this up with another video shortly with more on this topic. Thanks.